From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports after show live stream. It's our post-podcast live stream. Make sure, obviously, everyone stays tuned for the podcast that drops tomorrow. But welcome, and we encourage you to be interactive here. Ask questions. Tell us we're wrong. Tell us we're right. Don't be afraid to get in our faces during the live stream here. Guys, let's jump into it. Let's talk about esports and gaming.
What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry.
The live stream's getting bigger!
I know.
Make sure you go buy William's book, The Book of Esports, which it's killing it on Amazon as always. I think everyone has it by now, but if you don't, go buy it. And even if you do, maybe go buy a second copy, you know.
Nothing says I love my mom and dad like the Book of Esports.
And on the after show, we cover all the stuff that just didn't make it into the podcast. It's still just as good. It's just as interesting. It's maybe even better because we get to interact with you guys.
Ghost Runner, I managed to fit that in with about the busiest week of work I've ever had. So anytime
priorities, right?
It's an anti-William is late device.
That's very effective.
Don't count on it though.
Risky. Hot garbage. It's an indicator of bad money management. It's an indicator of immature management.
I have some hot takes.
For the vast majority of people who game, and look, if you look at just the gaming market, the dollar in revenue, the $137 billion global gaming market, 70 billion of that is mobile. 70 billion. For those guys, this is a revolution.
Listening. Thank you for tuning in every week. Thank you for leaving those 5-star ratings and reviews. We really appreciate it.
If I was Epic, I'd be hiring some of the best talent away from Facebook, not from other game developers. I actually think they should have a fire sale, right? Sell the company at rock bottom price because it's going to zero. And I think the natural, interesting acquirer would be Apple. And they would convert them to literally Apple arcades. We want people to funnel in. We want everyone in the audience ready to go and all hyped up. That's the idea. Julian says the live stream is the best by far.
And I, for one, welcome the fact that anything that gets you to stop playing Candy Crush is good for us as a whole.
The live stream!
William and I went on a bit of a tangent.
About World of Warcraft drops, yeah.
A little bit of a tangent. This is the first interesting thing I've seen from a competitive level to what Twitch is doing. I mean, let's start with a big story. It's impossible to ignore big numbers. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports after show live stream. I am Paul Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friends and co-hosts, Lindsay Foss, Owen, William Collis will be here in a little bit. For those of you who are new to the after show, welcome to the official after show live stream of esports. What we do here is we cover everything that didn't make it into the podcast. The stories are still just as good, just as interesting. We still dissect and look at everything through a business and C-suite lens, but it's all the stories we just couldn't get to on the podcast. For those of you guys who are here regularly, and I recognize so many of you in the chat, Cam and Martin and Chris, especially all you guys, thank you so much for coming every week. We really appreciate it. If you're new to this live stream, thank you for showing up. I encourage you to get involved, ask us questions, challenge us. This is the most fun we have all week because of you guys, and we thank you for showing up. Lindsay, Jeff, how are you guys doing?
It's been quite a day.
It has been
New
quite
Year, by the way, officially, and Happy New Year to everybody. It's the first live stream of the new year.
Yeah, what a start.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
We had some technical difficulties prior to the show.
Jeff just got a microphone, so he should sound better than usual. The problem is he has no headphones, so he can barely hear us.
Well, I'm going to join one of these contests we do on the after show and, hopefully win some. Are we giving anything away tonight? Some headphones?
I literally have stacks of headphones, like literally on my desk. I could probably, I have boxes of them just sitting around here. Okay,
mine are right here.
I'm just going to send you some.
But you're not even wearing them, Lindsay. What kind of, you don't even need them.
Nope. Actually, these are the ones that if I wear them, like you guys can hear everything. Like these are the Cricket headphones. The mic is too good. Okay. Yeah.
Better that we do the live stream here without the crickets. I just want to read some of the comments here. One of the best days of the week. Hope everyone's well. Cam, Happy New Year. Hope you're doing great. Martin agrees. Martin, I hope you're doing well. Welcome. And Chris says, is it safe to come out from the Division 2 yet? Chris, were you playing the Division 2? I don't know.
I think that's probably a joke about the current coup that's going on in Washington.
Situation.
Yeah, the coup that
it's a pretty good joke, although maybe it's too serious to joke about, but it's pretty good with the Division 2.
The joke
I am so much in the zone of esports business. All of this just I didn't even register. Okay, we just taped the podcast, and I will tell you, it was a start of the year. It was a podcast that I think was pure fire because of how positive it was, an optimistic sort of start of the year. So I just want to tease it, guys, if you'll allow me.
This day of our dying democracy.
I just want to tease it. Hang on, I'm going to share my screen here so you guys can see the articles we talked about. And I'm happy to touch on any of them with the group here with you guys. The first story we touched on was Roblox. This was from today, raising $520 million led by Altimeter Capital and Dragoneer Investment Group, two huge funds, like each manages. Well, I think Altimeter manages like 15 billion and Dragoneer something like 12 billion. Huge institutional funds putting hundreds of millions of dollars into Roblox, with essentially the plan to direct list. Just an aside, I'll give you a bit of a spoiler for the podcast. The $30 billion valuation, and Jeff specifically, I think I said that's exactly what they would IPO at. And so it ended up being 29.5. They did it on purpose so that I wouldn't. The question
is, Paul, what was the, as we're thinking about evaluating this decision from Roblox's point of view, and we'll clearly have to see how the stock trades. There's some debate about whether, with direct listings, you don't have the support of an investment bank. You could see the shares sell off, but what were they going to raise money at? Like, what was the range when they put out the S1? Do we know? Because the reason they pulled it back was obviously to get more money and a higher valuation. I assume they succeeded in that goal, but I don't remember what the actual, initial valuation was.
So here's what I can tell you. I have to look it up, but I think it was like half of that. Now, when they did a private round in February of last year, right? So literally a year ago, the valuation in that private round was $4 billion. So a year later, to go from 4 to 30 is a pretty major jump, and I'm pretty sure I'll have to go back and I'll say a big asterisk here because I have to go back and double check, but I think they were talking like in the 12 to 15 range.
That's what I remember. That's kind of what I was thinking as well.
But like what all you had to do was do the Unity math and you get to 30, right? Like that's fundamentally where I pulled the 30 from. Now, look, we spend a lot of time on the podcast sort of breaking it down, and you know, again, I'll sort of a little spoiler is, you know, they have 30 million users, daily active users, and a $30 billion valuation, right? So if you do the math, that's like every user's worth about $1,000. And look, and even in spite of that math, we come to the conclusion that this is a great thing. So, and we agreed, William and I. So, you know, it's interesting. It's a big number. Happy to talk about it more if you guys want at the end of the show. But the theme of this week's podcast, which you guys have to check out tomorrow, is all big numbers. So this was the first big number. Then we talked about this big number, which was Star Citizen raising $339 million and still isn't out yet. So they still don't have a release date.
This is good. It went really well for Cyberpunk. I'm sure this will work just as swimmingly.
So it's a game that's 10 years in development here. But look, it's another big number. And then the third big number we touched on was Epic buying a shopping mall for $95 million. Again, little teaser and spoiler. We talked about it in the context of like the $50 million, 100 Thieves compound. And in that context, a $95 million entire shopping mall seems actually quite cheap. But
it's in North Carolina, so I'm not surprised.
So we talked about that. And then the last thing we touched on was the $1.5 billion cultural center in Shanghai, esports center complex, whatever you want to call it, has everything under the sun, a venue, a hotel, you name it, that they're investing $1.5 billion in. So tomorrow's episode is the big money episode.
Something seems mispriced here. If the shopping mall was $75 million,
95.
and this, what appears to be an esports stadium, is $1.5 billion, something's not right here.
To be fair, they bought the shopping mall for like their corporate offices, didn't they?
Yeah, like they bought it for their head.
Oh, no, the $75 million, the shopping mall Epic thing is, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they like renovate it, but like it makes perfect sense. I mean, Apple spent like $1 billion on their headquarters, so it's not like
the Apple headquarters is cool. Yeah. It looks like a spaceship. Whereas a shopping mall, I never thought of it as like office space. Like there's no windows in a shopping mall.
Well, you know what I mean? Have to renovate it, but even if they just got the land, I mean, that's not, $75 million is not that much for
95.
95, Jeff. 95.
Well, now it's just crazy. 95.
This is out of control.
And for that reason, I'm out.
But it's one of those things where there's just so much unknown about this specifically, right? Like how much government dollars is backing this? What kind of tax breaks are they getting? The reality is we don't really know enough to be able to analyze this one and say this makes sense or this doesn't. I think the consensus has to be like it's only good things, right? Whether it works or not, whether esports grows enough by 2023 to sort of fill the 300 tournaments a year they want to do, there's some question marks. But anytime you have $1.5 billion being poured into the industry, real estate play or not, you kind of struggle to find sort of bad things to say about it. So that's the teaser of the podcast tomorrow, guys. It's the big numbers episode, is what we're calling it. For today, we have a lot of stuff to talk about. I wanted to start with something that kind of, I'll call it a softball, but it's also something that surprised me. And this was an article from the ministryofsport.com. And they had, they obviously took this article from somewhere else, but they had a listing of the top esports prize money rankings, right? In terms of who earned the most money in esports. And I'll bring the article up here. The headline says, Chess Grandmaster tops esports prize money rankings. So they have Magnus Carlsen, who's won the world championship. Like he's been the top chess player in the world for the last 10 years, basically, as number one.
and then like a handful of Call of Duty pros after that. That's basically the list, right? And the question I have for you guys is, on this live stream, on this podcast, we've said chess is definitely an esport. It's so cool to see, GM Hikaru, streaming for TSM and playing chess. And if chess was invented today, it would definitely be an esport. And, we've sort of backed that narrative collectively. And then I saw this article and I'm like, wait a second, something's not right here, right? Like this doesn't feel right to me. As much as I believe streaming of chess feels like a little bit of an esport, is Magnus Carlsen, is he the top esports earner? Is this really, is it good for the esports industry as a whole to sort of make this kind of call? Or are we sort of now trying to include too much in the definition and we only hurt ourselves? Like, where are you guys on that thought?
Lindsay, I'll let you start.
Okay. Chris and I talked about this on Twitter a little bit earlier. I think it's great. So one of the things about these lists, especially I was looking at the top 10 team earnings too. I mean, the amount of potential earnings that are out there are just around 15 to 20% of what they were last year because of the pandemic. So part of it is that chess was super easily translatable in the pandemic, and they're still able to hold tournaments. It's still very familiar. People still wanted to watch it, whereas some other tournaments, games, whatever, without the live element, it's not as exciting. So we'll see if this carries over into next year. That would be an interesting trend. But the other part is that I still don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for this. It's a little bit, I mean, this is where it gets a little bit tough to differentiate between esports and gaming and, top earning streamers versus top earning esports competitive. And the delineation between all of those is really murky and unclear. So obviously he's not the most popular Twitch streamer, and I wouldn't expect him to have the most money made off of that or most money made off of endorsements or whatever. So when I look at it from that lens, I don't think it's a bad thing that he's leading in this very narrow niche category called esports, where we're only looking at tournament winnings that have been decimated during a pandemic. So
yeah, but like even non-pandemic, right? Like even if you go back, he probably still would have made the top 10
at
right?
least
At $500,000. Right? Even in a year where Dota 2, the winning team, each guy makes, a couple $1,000,000, like he still would be up there. And I think the bigger question is, everyone seems gung-ho to call chess an esport, right? But then you see a list like, at least I saw a list like this and I go, wait a second, maybe have we gone too fast here, right? Like Magnus Carlsen to me has never been an esports competitor. Right. And so
I wouldn't be surprised if it started trending downwards, though, if people kind of use chess as an introductory way of getting into it because it is familiar and traditional. And then got
see it as a gateway drug for like League of Legends. Like people start watching chess.
Hearthstone, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
very much think that kind of strategy play that people get into is easily transferable to other games, and that it could be a way of just doing that. Chess has the advantage of longevity. I mean, it's been around for thousands of years. So I don't think it's a bad thing right now. Maybe in 10 years, I would think that this would be a bad trend. Maybe even in 5 years. But for right now, this year, it seems.
Let me make my point even stronger. I feel like we're using chess at this point, right? Like chess is being used in sort of the dirty version of the word, right? Like we're using it for sort of like clout almost. Right? Because it's cool to have chess as an esport, and chess is massively popular internationally, right? And then as soon as you have Magnus Carlsen at the top of the list, everyone goes, whoa, no, not an esport, right? Like, I feel like we're using it a little bit. And Chris brings up a good point here, Jeff, maybe you want to comment on, like, when do we call poker an esport?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. You gotta, it's a slippery slope. At some point, can you call anything that's being played electronically, it's just a slippery slope.
That's a good point. Like at some point, can you just call anything you play
anything that's transmitted over the internet? Like, like if we're flipping a coin and betting on the outcome, like, is that an esport if it's filmed and like you're in one place and I'm in another place? I mean, I don't know.
It's an interesting problem. Question for you guys is, do you think we're going to see more of this? Do we go down that slippery slope, or next year do we not see Magnus Carlsen anywhere on this list? Where do you think the industry
he'll probably be on the list if he was included one year, why wouldn't he be included the next year? My question was just going to be around like the composition of those earnings. Like, was this he won tournaments against other players and that tournament was broadcast and people watched it?
Yes. It's prize money.
Was he physically in the same room as that other person, or was it I guess my question, because if he was in the same room playing chess and someone was just watching it, then that's just exactly like what Chris said. That's poker, the poker analogy. Like, that's not an esport. That's just sports being broadcast. Maybe that's just like me threading the needle, like super, super thin. And then my other question, or was a lot of this earnings from him on Twitch, playing chess? Because maybe that would make it more an esport, or maybe not. I don't know. I've talked myself in circles here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, Martin brings up a question. This is just in the US, right? Surely Faker or other Asian League of Legends players would be over this. Martin, I think what's specific about this list is it doesn't count like salary. So they're not counting like how much Faker gets paid every year to play League, right? This is purely tournament winnings. This is purely prize money. And because League didn't hold, I don't think, as nearly as many tournaments as they might usually have. No. They did not earn as much. But this is, as far as I understand, an international list. So, the Call of Duty guys are up there because they actually did play a Call of Duty championship. Mm-hmm. It's usually all Dota 2 guys who are up there because Dota 2 has the biggest prize pool, and the winners usually take home a couple $1 million each. But because of that, we see this sort of distorted list this year. Chris says, of course, how else can we validate the continued VC asks? I mean, it is, I think, to Jeff's point, a slippery slope, Chris, right? This is the challenge. I'm all for more inclusivity because then everything gets bigger, right? When the numbers get bigger, the industry gets bigger. Now we lump chess into everything. But at some point,
I think one thing I was going to say is, as we mature, as esports matures as a sport, if you will, I think it'll be a good thing for the whole industry to get away from talking about earnings this way. Like, you don't hear often, rank. I mean, you sort of do in traditional sports a little bit, highest paid players, but a lot more you hear them talking about, best players, rank the top 10 quarterbacks, rank the top, 10 players in the NBA. It's not like, oh, well, this guy makes more than LeBron because he happened to sign a contract last year. Like, the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, I mean, isn't always the best player. I think right now it is Patrick Mahomes, so bad example, but like typically it's just the next one that signs. So,
yep.
The highest paid quarterback.
To your point.
Yeah, like exactly. So I don't know if it doesn't necessarily do the industry a service to be talking about this list versus like, the most talented or the most viewed, stuff like that. I mean, it's good for kind of clicks and it's interesting, but I do think as we mature as an industry, we probably won't be talking about highest paid quite as much, and it'll be more, other attributes that we're ranking on.
I mean, Cam, I think, agrees with you, Jeff, which seems irrelevant without salaries. On the chess side, any buzz is good buzz, I guess. Yeah. I mean, that's true. Let's move on, guys, to another list. Chris says the professor lumped in speed running to the esports narrative. We're still figuring out the space. Chris, it's such a good point. William did put speed running in there. And look, if you've been watching Twitch over the last few days, Games Done Quick has been one of the top Twitch channels by far from a viewership perspective, literally 24 hours, right? It's a marathon. At least you could argue that has a pretty big audience, and they're still playing video games. So, and it's, it's a more modern video games. So I think that's an easier one for me to swallow, even though I was all for sort of chess as an esport. This list sort of didn't feel right to me. Let me put it that way. I think William, if he was here, I don't want to speak for him. I think he'd have no issue with this list, frankly, because of that, though. Let's talk about another list, right? Like, everyone makes lists at the beginning of the year. And this one sort of was a personal, I almost had like a personal beef with this one. The most watched Twitch channels in 2020. Okay. And this is from Esports. And if you look at the list, it's maybe too small here to see, but XQC, who's more of like a variety streamer, by a long shot was the biggest, like literally almost 20 million more hours than the next guy, even though he streamed like only a third of the time of the guy below him, right? So a lot bigger audience, many more peak viewers, many more average viewers, etc. You have a lot of typical names, big streamers on the list, and then you have the typical like ESL, CS:GO tournaments that attract a lot of viewers. Now, XQC was sort of what I wanted to talk about here, and it's more like a pat myself on the back moment. I'm pretty sure I have my my banner still, but it's one of those things where, if you guys remember, anyone who's been listening to the podcast long enough, what I said about Overwatch League years ago was they were lacking personality. And if you remember, they kicked out XQC. They literally forced him out at the time. He misbehaved. He did some things that were not so nice. He apologized for them. I'm not defending his bad behavior by no means, but the guy had personality. And 2 years later, he's the biggest streamer on the planet, like by a huge margin. Is this not exactly do you guys not agree that this is exactly what esports has been missing? And the fact that they missed out on a guy like XQC means they're really kind of blind to those personality opportunities? Like, doesn't it reinforce my entertainment above all argument? Or do you guys not see it that way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is something we talked about a lot last week. I 100% agree. Sorry, I was adjusting my selfie light while you were talking, so I missed a little bit. My wife was texting me from the other room, told me I look incredibly pale on the stream, so the streamer light is apparently not good for me. But I caught the end of what you were saying, and I 100% agree. I mean, we talked about this a lot recently, you and I, Paul, about how, as esports matures, there's going to be the competitive side and then sort of the entertainment side, and they do need to come together. But, the entertainment side right now, I think, is lacking from a lot of, a lot of the publishers and a lot of the leagues. The players just aren't that interesting. With XQC, I agree. I think that was a missed opportunity. Now, he may have done some things that justified him getting suspended or banished from the league or whatever. But I agree. I mean, I think the league should do a better job creating the entertainment part of esports, which is going to be important moving forward.
I mean, Lindsay, look, like, is this not a literally like a direct criticism of the management at, the Dallas Fuel where XQC played, but also Overwatch League in general, right? Like, and again, I'm not defending XQC's bad behavior, but you have problematic employees all the time, right? If they're superstars, though, you figure out how to manage around those character sort of quirks, right? And had they recognized, I think, the potential, the management there should have figured out a way to extract sort of the magic that XQC brings and still sort of try to keep him somewhat in line so he doesn't misbehave. Do you not see it that way? Or like, is this not an indictment of the management too?
Well, you know how much I love to crap on Activision Blizzard's hires for
They're
energy.
figuring it out. The baseball guy's figuring it out, Lindsay. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. Just as the League of Baseball's figuring it out, I'm sure. I think this is a point that we've harped on quite a bit, and I still think it's true. And I think even if they had banned XQC, they could have at least recognized what he brought to the league and tried to build or grow that in other talent. Right now, they could be looking at him and looking at his methods and trying to grow and
I don't
build.
think they can afford him now. That's the problem, right?
You could try. You could hire someone. You could make people take acting class. You could do a lot of things to make people more entertaining, regardless of if you banned him or not. I mean, again, proper management always is the solution. We know that that's not happening. They could have done a lot of things to bring XQC's entertainment level into the league, keeping him or not keeping him, and they have done none of that. So it's not surprising.
Yeah, I mean, it was so obvious, right? Like that the guy had personality to spare. And, we talked last week about WWE and stuff getting into esports. Like, to me, this is why he succeeds on Twitch. He's the epitome of this character, and people watch him because they know he's going to say something silly. They watch him because he's over the top. They watch, like, there's 10 different reasons why they watch him, and I just, even League of Legends, with all the viewership they have, the people are really clinical, right? Like the teams are clinical. The fakers of the world are clinical. There's nothing that like compelling about them.
However, at Worlds, they at least have the most incredible displays of entertainment that can possibly be fathomed.
No question. They make it a big show.
Yep,
Yeah,
there is something.
If the people are clinical, at least make the show grandiose.
Right.
Like,
do something. I don't know.
So Lindsay, I'm curious about your point, because you seem to blame it on Activision or whoever, the management. Like why, short of the WWE, where that, like I've said numerous times, it's fake. It is entertainment. So that it's like a movie or it's scripted. So you're finding actors. But like the NFL, I wouldn't say the teams go out of their way to like make players be crazy off the field or have cool, backstory. It's like they almost do the opposite.
They don't rein it in.
I would actually argue the opposite. Like the NFL, I feel like most professional sports teams, all you hear is like, do your job, focus on what you can control. Don't go out partying. Don't be, perfect example, bringing it back to gaming. Juju Smith-Schuster with the Steelers, he was doing all those stupid TikTok dances and, he's
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And the team lost 3 games in a row and his coach was like, hey, stop doing that. And he did. So like, I don't know. I feel like maybe the criticism should be on the players not creating the personalities and not being dynamic. And maybe there's something, maybe it's just the people who are inherently really, really good at strategy video games aren't like the most dynamic personalities. But I wouldn't say like Activision or any of the leagues can force it, because that almost might be worse.
No,
like,
and that's not
players that don't have it is going to be even worse than kind of not doing it at all.
However, they're the ones making personnel decisions like getting rid of XQC. So yes, you can hire a bunch of vanilla players who don't do anything. Whatever, make them do weird photo shoots or something where they don't even have to talk. Like there's a billion ways you can make yourself engaging and interesting that don't require a person to have any personality or do anything other than show up for the job at which they're paid for. A lot of athletes go above and beyond that simply because of who they are, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them just show up and play really well and meet fans and talk to people and do things that they're contractually obligated to do. Even Marshawn Lynch's "I'm only here so I don't get fined" is like vastly more interesting than getting nothing.
But
so
it doesn't have to be everyone either.
No, either.
Right?
Like
like
one
a
person
team needs one XQC, doesn't need a whole team of XQC. Like
it could be the mascot team. You could hire a literal hype man. It doesn't even have to be.
It's got to be organic though. You can't just have like a team of like robots and then have like your token like.
Well, that's
like
what I would have done. I said it 2 years ago. If I was managing the New York Excelsior, right, I'd have 8 Koreans and the 9th guy would be some guy from Brooklyn, right, who's just massively entertaining, right, huge character, does the interviews, does the content, has the following, right? Like he's the guy who stirs things up. He's trash talking the other team, right? Like it doesn't have to be every guy. It has like the football example I like is you look at any football team. There's 2 guys who do awesome end zone dances. Always 2 guys, right? You could probably pick 2 guys on any football team who have some personality. That's not.
But it's not like the GM doesn't, when he's evaluating in the draft, he's like, well, we don't have our end zone guy yet. So like, let's, push up this guy in our draft board because like, we got to make sure we have the end zone guy. It's just organic. And I love your idea about having like the one like crazy Brooklyn dude, but it's just ridiculous. It's like that, that's a mascot. What you're describing is a mascot.
It's at the exact opposite end of the spectrum where they do hire people purely based on entertainment. There's a medium there.
Well,
there's a medium.
Very simple business question. Would the Dallas Fuel be more valuable today as an esports team with XQC signed to their roster?
Yes.
Okay. Then firing him was a very bad business decision, right? Like that's just the reality of it. I think they had to figure out how to manage and navigate around the landmines that come along with XQC, right? Because you don't know what he's going to say. But I think any good manager can sort of navigate that and figure it out. Like it's not such a huge liability to the team that you have to kick him off.
NFL teams still have PR and media days. Like there is still a way to incorporate some type of audience interaction or some type of audience interest, even if you're a robot. I mean, it doesn't matter. And that's where I would expect the marketing teams, the PR teams, the entertainment teams to step up and do something. I don't expect robotic players to go out of their comfort zone. I expect the people around them to say, okay, we have 8 people on a team who don't talk that much. What are we going to do to make ourselves engaging and interesting to the people around us? Because they do their job of playing games really well.
But I think, Cam brings up a good point where, being a personality and being interesting is as valuable as actual skill in generating numbers. But I think the problem is it's sort of self-selecting. Like there are organizations that are built around that exact concept, and they are doing incredibly well. And I would argue that, the whole point of this conversation, I think, was exactly that people are doing great on Twitch, being entertaining. They don't necessarily have to be the best players. But when you create a professional league, the goal is to win that league. It's not necessarily to put together this really, I don't know, team that doesn't win that just is really interesting.
The goal is
hold on. Let me push you guys on that. Sorry to cut in, okay? And I'm going to read your guys' comments in a second here, but I want to push back on this. Let's look at this list, okay? I'm Guild Esports. We've talked about Guild Esports. They raised, I don't know, what, $25 million to build an esports team, right? If I'm Guild Esports, I go sign XQC, Summit, Nick Merckx, Tyler One, right? And I go have them play League of Legends. And they will probably never win any tournament, right? They may win a few games here and there, but they probably won't win anything of any value. Do you think, though, I could build probably the most valuable esports company on the planet just because of the entertainment value, though?
Well,
even if they never win?
I don't know if Guild would be able to afford all those people. But I think what we're getting at here is an interesting point where skill isn't everything in quote-unquote esports or the ecosystem if we include broader streaming and entertainment. Like there's not a single, short of the Harlem Globetrotters, there's not a single team that I'm aware of in professional sports that operates under the, or at least admits like, hey, we want to just be interesting. Like nobody's like, when we're looking for players, we want the most interesting, exciting players. We want to put together the best players so we win. And maybe this is a sign of esports being more advanced or less mature in the sense of, as a fan of a team, I pretty much care first and foremost about winning, right? Like I'm a Jets fan. We're terrible. But what I care about is winning. I don't watch the game and be like, oh, you know what? I don't care if we lose today, but look at that guy's eye black and look at his sideline dance. It's it was worth it. We got our asses kicked by Miami, but it was entertaining. Whereas I think in esports, maybe there is some element of that with certain teams. And maybe it's because the leagues haven't developed enough where it's they just don't have fan bases where, when a team wins the Overwatch League, it's not like they're like, oh, that was amazing, we won the Overwatch League. Maybe they just haven't developed the fan bases enough. Does that make sense?
Well, but Jeff,
or winning is the only thing that matters.
The whole crux of the argument there is the NFL has teams and fan bases mostly because of regionality. That's something that hasn't worked that well in esports. Mm-hmm. So how do you build a fan base if there's nothing for people to become fans of? That's the disconnect to me that I feel like is getting glossed over here. The NFL has a strategy for acquiring fans. Through those fans, they are able to make money, sell sponsorships, get TV ads, sell slots, all that stuff. There is not a strategy to acquire fans in this way, in the same geographic way that we've seen work very well. So you have to do something to get people to be fans of you. You can't just be like, we have the best team, we win everything. No one gives a shit if you're super boring.
That was kind of exactly I agree. That was kind of exactly my point. But I guess what I'm saying is will that change? Will at some point, will it matter to fans to win, that their team won the Overwatch League or the Call of Duty League? Or will it be, hey, I like FaZe, I like 100 Thieves because they're just the most interesting. I don't care if they win, they're just interesting. I don't know.
When you have players and teams that you can fall in love with for whatever reason, whether it's because they win or because you like their personalities, then you will actually see a development of a fan base where it maybe matters more about winning. But you have to have something people can fall in love with first.
That's kind of circular logic, right? Because we're talking about whether we're picking on skill, we're picking on entertainment, and you're saying, well, once they get entertaining, then I'll care if they win.
No,
right?
I think
what you're saying is you kind of want both. You want players that are the best and entertaining. But what I'm saying is maybe that's not an option.
I think what is particularly insightful about Lindsay's comment is more a question of a bar, right? Which is with sports, you have this automatic psychology of I live in New York, therefore I'm a fan of the New York team, right? That has not worked in esports. So esports sort of has this higher bar of how do I bring fans through the door? It's not good enough to just put New York on my jersey and fans will just show up. So, you know, there's this elevated bar of like, okay, well, I need to do something extra. And what is that extra? I do want to move on, guys, though, but I really like that. Let me just read some of these comments. Doesn't this apply to most esports, not just Activision Blizzard? Yeah, Chris, it applies to everything. It's the golf clap crowd today. That will evolve as we try and monetize the event. That's true, too. Cam says, NHL proves it, almost no personality allowed versus the NBA, which is very much a star-driven league. Stars boost viewership. Esports need to allow players to be themselves. I sort of don't agree with that, Cam, because to Chris's point, you do have an enforcer. You have a guy who is the show in hockey. We read this one. Greg agrees with Cam. If we're discussing a business, Paul's Brooklyn teammate makes sense. Yeah, I'm telling you, that team, my New York Excelsior, would have been so entertaining, so entertaining. It'd look a little bit like the Jersey Shore, but it'd be so entertaining.
I would watch that in a second then.
Greg says the New York Excelsior team was not engaging. No one could even talk to the fans. I mean, the problem is many of the players don't even speak much English. And so, you know, there is an automatic divide there, which is problematic.
That's why you need your Brooklyn guy.
That's it.
Or something.
Your high skill players are still humans. Why are we assuming anyone good at games is miserable? True,
well, we're not
Cam.
assuming that. We're just, it seems to be the case currently.
Stereotyping that we're discussing.
Yeah, it's sort of a stereotype that is somewhat earned. It's not universally true, but it seems.
Let's put it this way: if it wasn't true, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. It just wouldn't be a topic.
Cam says to your Jets comment, Jeff, Atlanta Reign did that season 1 of Overwatch League. They sucked, so they played their rookie, who was a fan favorite. There has to be balance. Yeah, I mean, Atlanta. Yeah, but the question, like, to me, you look at Overwatch League. There's no like one team that's more winning than the others. Like, first of all, the league's too young, and so they shouldn't have cared about winning. They should have cared about being entertaining, because no one's going to be like, "Oh my God, they're the one-time champion! Like, what a dynasty!" Yeah. You know. Chris says experiential venues equals fan acquisition. Chris, I agree. Especially like on the live front specifically, I agree. Repackage esports, also agree. Do you think this opens up a bigger future for 1v1 type games that are driven more by the big personalities? Andrew, chess, clearly the future of all esports. Yeah, you know, look at fighting games or even chess. I don't think 1v1 personally, and maybe you guys have a different thought, but I don't think 1v1, like 1v1, the problem is there's too much onus then to be a big personality, right? Whereas if you have a 5 or 6 man team, again, you only need one guy to be entertaining to sort of lift everything else. 1v1 is just a lot of sort of pressure on that one person to sort of be entertaining. And in fighting games, I think about who's the big guy there? Star Fox or Fox something, right? Where he'd show up in his suit, his furry suit. Like, guy was a personality, and so he had a following as a consequence. He was great at playing the games too, but he had a personality. Let's move on. Let's talk about, we have some sort of lighter stuff. Let's do a little bit heavier topic first, and then we'll get into some light stuff. This one, there's been an update on this, which I'll tell you after the fact. But it's an article about Huawei removing Tencent games from its app store after they had a dispute over some promotional agreement. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is it felt like a direct parallel with what's going on between Epic and Apple, where you have Huawei here who has an app store, right? And because they control that audience, who can download things from, who can be on their app store in the first place, right? They're a gatekeeper to the audience of people who have their phones. They're able to sort of shut things down on a whim, right? And even a company as large as Tencent is somewhat a prisoner to the gatekeepers who own the app stores and the distribution mechanisms. This is the argument, obviously, that Epic's making in the US, where, you know, they think Apple's too much of a gatekeeper and it should be more of an open platform. Do you guys see this as sort of, I will say, I'll ruin it, but, you know, they've since resolved the dispute and now the Tencent games are back on. But do we see this as sort of a trend where there's this revolution against sort of app stores and distribution mechanisms, right? Is this another domino and we're going to see more and more of this? Or is this just another one-off? Like, I'm curious how you guys feel about this gatekeeping and distribution issue.
I think it's probably more of a one-off. I mean, the reality is, and Tencent might be the only person that has the power to potentially push around a distributor like that. But just the reality is there's no one content maker that has the power to affect change. I mean, we're seeing it right now, literally with Epic, where they've pulled Fortnite out of the App Store, and, you know, Apple couldn't care less. You know, the 300 million or whatever to Apple, you know, whatever Apple gets 30% of that, like it's just irrelevant to Apple's bottom line. That there's no bargaining power. Now Tencent, with all the games they have and all the power they have in China, maybe it's a little different, and maybe that's why this situation took 48 hours to resolve rather than 48 weeks or months or whatever. But Tencent also has their own kind of app store as well, right? With WeChat, or at least a platform that people can download games onto. So I think the dynamic
of mobile phones, right? That
Huawei the power dynamic here with Tencent versus Huawei is wildly different than the power dynamic would be with Apple or Google versus anyone, you know, besides maybe Tencent. So I don't know if we can make an apples to apples comparison. So I don't think this is gonna, you know, start some sort of, you know, momentum or you know, resurgence against the app store makers. And there's just not enough power. Like I remember when I was an analyst covering all the mobile gaming companies, when the Apple Epic, you know, lawsuit first started, and our investors would always ask these mobile gaming companies like Glue and Zynga and SciPlay, like, hey, are you guys gonna like join the fight and like try to like get this, you know, take rate down? Because obviously if it goes from 30% to 15%, that 15% just falls right to your bottom line. Like, this would be a massive win for you. And the response from all these CEOs was like, nope, like we are not joining that. Like we're gonna stand in the back, and if it changes,
you go ahead. You go first.
Yeah, like none of them wanted to be tip of the spear, because you know, if you're Zynga and you're making $2 billion in revenue, you don't matter to Apple. You might be a decently valued partner, but they could lose you and not, you know, Tim Cook isn't losing a second of sleep over something like that. And Zynga is one of the biggest mobile publishers out there. So long answer, but the short answer is no.
Yeah, like the fact that this one got resolved so quickly sort of makes the Epic Apple fight look even more worrisome for Epic, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I just don't know where that resolution's going to come. Like, because Apple, I think at this point wants to make a point and doesn't care, right? Whereas, you know, Tencent, to your point, Jeff, has a lot of weight to throw around, a lot of dollars, way more than Epic, even more government, like in China, right? Like we're talking about like bureaucratic kind of power, government power, where they can affect change if they really want to, and, you know, make it miserable for Huawei if they really want to. And this got resolved so quickly. It's like almost a non-issue. It makes the US, like the Apple Epic fight, look really like a lost cause for Epic at this point. I don't know, Lindsay, if that's the conclusion you come to, or
to be fair.
Right?
It always looked like a lost cause for Epic, to be fair.
But like Tim Sweeney's really doubling down. Have you seen like his latest like posts, like what he puts on Twitter and everything? Like I should literally bring it up.
Got resolved quickly because this morning 2 of Tencent's apps were banned from the US. And obviously Huawei is going through significant issues with the US as well. So I can imagine that some petty fight in China would not, or some petty fight between them in their home country would be much easier to resolve than all their other issues.
True.
I would say like Tim Sweeney, you know, Tim Sweeney's table round, the way to interpret this is that he knows that the only way he can win is in the court of public opinion, right? Because he can't win in the actual court, we don't think. He can't win in like the power ring. Like he's not going to walk into Tim Cook's office and say, boom, Fortnite's out of the App Store. Like, give me all the money. Like, let's come to the negotiating table. He can't win there. But where he could theoretically win is by getting so much popular opinion against Apple and kind of creating this negativity, creating a little bit of doubt or some sort of just negative response from consumers that maybe he could get some sort of like little win out of Apple. So this is his only play. So when you say he's doubling down, I mean, it's almost like he has to, or just completely admit that he's lost. But, when you're a billionaire and you're Tim Sweeney and you're not going to do that. So this is kind of his only realistic play.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he's like a multi-billionaire to me makes this that much more like ego driven, right? He knows he's lost. I think if he's smart, he knows he's lost. And there's now just pride and ego on the line. And so doubling down seems like the only option, but it's the Bill Ackman, Carl Icahn like fight where it's just like the meat of the fight has been lost, right? Everyone forgets what we're actually fighting about. And it's just billionaire against billionaire trying to sort of push the other one around for ego's sake is what this kind of, tweet feels like, what this kind of campaign feels like. And then you put that sort of against the background of Roblox that's really exploding, not just in popularity, but in the mainstream media from fundraising perspective, hype perspective, the metaverse conversations all around them now. Like if we talked about this on the podcast, you look at their press release, they don't even mention gaming. Literally, the press release of their fundraise, they call themselves a human cooperation platform. Like it's not even gaming anymore, right? And this was the promise of Epic. And then he's out here tweeting this. Like this feels like a guy whose eyes not on the ball because he's worth $4 billion. And what does he care at this point, right? Like, what does he care? He just wants to prove that he's right. He wants to make some point. That's what it feels like now. And I don't know. This guy said it's sort of right.
I don't know. I mean,
I read that one too.
Like we've sort of made this argument a couple times, but I'm not sure comparing Roblox to Fortnite was ever a fair comparison, where Roblox was always a platform, right? It was built from day one. It was built to be a platform, user-generated content, interactive social interactivity, second place or whatever. Fortnite was not really built as that. Fortnite was built as a game. And I know the vision was always to turn it into a platform, but I don't know if it's fair to look at it today and say, one's a platform, one's still a game. Like that means Epic failed. It just means Epic started further back. And I know your argument is, okay, well, this is a distraction and that's why they haven't gotten there. But I think I don't think it's exactly fair to say, because Fortnite was way behind Roblox. People just didn't realize how much further Roblox was ahead to begin with.
Man, that's debatable whether they were ahead. Guys, I want to move on. I want to do, this is a 2-second story, okay? And it's going to be like lightning round here. LCS has a new brand identity. I want your immediate knee-jerk reaction, what you think of this new sort of marketing look and feel here. I want you guys to chime in as well, those of you in the chat. New LCS brand identity. So this is League of Legends. What do you think?
That's it?
That's it.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Looks like the corporate logo for like Shazam or like Square. So there's some company that has this as its corporate logo, I feel like.
I thought it was terrible. Just really, really bad. The colors are wrong. It's just this messed up jumble of letters.
Is it like everything in the picture?
No, I think like this is it's more just the here we go. Where's this thing?
I don't know that I understand. Oh, I see. Yeah, no, it is.
So I want to get to the logo.
Yeah, it's in the upper corner.
Here's the new logo. There. Here.
Oh, boo.
There you go. It's pretty ugly, I think.
It's pretty sleek.
You like it?
I don't know. I mean, as a wise
esport
man
on the planet.
As a wise man said to me earlier in the day, there are people who are paid good money to be graphic designers, and we should let those people, do their work.
You should trust that guy. Whoever gave you such sage advice, you should trust.
He's near and dear to my heart.
Just looks a little smushed to me.
It's a little smushed. It's a little messy.
Choice is very 5 years ago to me.
The color scheme, I agree, Lindsay, is also like feels a little passé.
Yeah. I mean, minimalist, futurist, not words I would use to describe that. It reminds me of like a TIA Cref logo from like 3 years ago.
Yeah. Cam says it looks like a printer company.
Yeah.
I just want to get to Roberto's question here. Off-topic, random question. If there were to be an esports arena within New York City universities, where do you believe it would thrive the most? Cornell Tech or NYU?
This is a very specific off-topic question. I'm intrigued to know.
It's very specific, but Lindsay, you went to Cornell, no?
No, I went to Carnegie Mellon, but we
went to
actually
Carnegie Mellon, that's right.
Well, we played at NYU, and I don't know anything about Cornell Tech or Roosevelt Island. NYU's location is fantastic.
I assume Palladium Hall is it on NYU's campus, so I would say it'd probably be that one versus Roosevelt Island, which I think you have to take like what is it called? The gondola. You have to take like a gondola to get to Roosevelt Island.
Here's the fundamental question, which is, do universities need dedicated esports arenas of their own anyways? Like, Roberto, are you asking if they should repurpose, like which one of these should repurpose an existing facility, or which one of these should build a dedicated venue? Because I think I'm in the camp of, I don't think we're at the stage yet where universities it really makes financial sense to be building dedicated venues. Reusing existing venues, frankly, I think every university should be doing it. So to answer, like, that would be my answer to your question, which is any university that has an esports program, and especially ones that are thinking about esports holistically, like having an athletics program where kids are competing in esports, as well as education in esports. Every university should have some reuse of existing facilities to do that, where kids can compete, other schools can come compete. Like, to me, this is just part of what any good university should be doing on the esports front. So my answer would be both Cornell and NYU. In terms of dedicated, I don't think either one. I don't know if that answers your question. Maybe you wanted me to pick one, but when you have like, I teach
different than Cornell.
Like, I teach at St. Peter's, which is a much smaller university than either Cornell or NYU, and they've reused existing facilities where kids learn esports, where kids train in esports, and where kids can compete in esports. So if St. Peter's can do it, right, a small private university in New Jersey, Cornell and NYU definitely should be doing it. To me, that's a no-brainer. The advice I have for most universities, and Roberto, I'm not sure if you're involved on the college esports front, but my advice to most universities is just don't try and do it alone. Like, don't try and figure it out on your own. Get really smart people who are really embedded in the space to come in and help you figure it out. Chris says Rorschach test to the logo. And Cam, I think Cam might be making fun of you.
No, it's because every time I say Carnegie Mellon, I think it's hilarious that I went to a school called Carnegie Mellon. It really does sound like a fancy melon.
It's true. I never thought of it like
Le
that.
Melon, Carnegie.
I think you just devalued your Carnegie Mellon education, unfortunately.
Is
I've done it several times, Jeff. It's fine.
Is the rare Carnegie Mellon in season at this time?
I mean that in the nicest way.
Great school to go to, hilarious school to say out loud.
Martin says, I like it, cool design, just wish it had more color. Well, I guess everyone sees it differently. I didn't like the color, let's put it that way, and I thought the design was a little bit jumbled. All right, what do we want to talk about here? This one, Jeff, I want you to talk about this one very quickly. This is kind of like a Jeff topic. Because I know it affects you. And I would love sort of your 2-second.
I want Lindsay's opinion too.
Commentary on this. Anything betting, I sort of throw your way.
Yeah.
I have topics for Lindsay tonight, actually. Actually, I have a good one.
Oh, God.
But this was from legalsportsbetting.com, and it's this announcement that esports and sports betting coming to Puerto Rico. And I know there was other news this week around New York with sports betting. Again, it's sort of one of these domino questions, which is, are these key milestones anyone looking at esports betting should be paying attention to?
Well, certainly, yeah. Any state that gets legalized is obviously important on both the sports side and the esports side. New York clearly being, more important because it's one of the bigger states in terms of population. Puerto Rico is interesting. What I think is even more interesting, the fact that they mention esports, because this isn't an esports website, it's just legalsportsbetting.com.
Yep.
So it's interesting and it's notable that they highlight esports separate from sports. I think that's probably good for the industry. Some states either haven't addressed it at all. Some states have, done it like this. I think in this case, it is interesting that they chose to have that, highlighted separately. I think that speaks to how big the opportunity is.
Is it unusual to have it specific in the bill? Like, are you seeing more and more of this where esports is being broken out separately from the sports betting legislation? It's
a little bit unique to have it in the legislation. A lot of times that happens more on the regulatory side. And once you have the gambling commission sort of, because the legislators write like the broad rules, and then usually the regulators kind of come in and actually implement the laws. It's like a little civics 101 for us, I guess, here on the Business of Esports. So that is a little unique, but I wouldn't say completely out of the ordinary.
Is Puerto Rico such a small market that it's not doesn't have an impact? Like, do you think this is going to influence other? New York obviously would, right?
Yeah, but New York is huge. The debate with New York that I saw, and this isn't necessarily completely related to esports, but there was some talk about it potentially being operated by the lotteries, which is a little bit different. Like in New Jersey, it's a lot more of a free market where anyone can get a skin, anyone can be involved. If it's done by the lotteries, usually they'll choose like one supplier. It's frankly not a great way to do it. Like what we've seen in Oregon, I think Delaware, those states have gone that direction, and it just ends up kind of, as any other government, operated sort of monopoly, it ends up not being great for the consumers, not being great for the actual size of the market. So hopefully, Cuomo decides to kind of go back on that, and they make it more of a free market. But yeah, I just thought that was an interesting thing to highlight.
It's interesting also that all of this happened like on the same day. I'm wondering, like, almost like there's coordinated esports betting legislation happening.
Well, I think the New York one was much more of the sports betting, but the
reason why I pulled the Puerto Rico one is because it was explicit.
Yeah, it mentioned.
The New York one was not explicit at all, right? Yeah. And I agree that's the bigger news. But anyways, let's move on to some really big news. This one's for Lindsay. Really big news. I love this one because we sort of like touched on it, I think, on a past live stream, but this headline was just so explicit.
Good.
And the headline here was from Essentially Sports: Fall Guys to finally add the G2 esports skin, but is it too late? So Lindsay,
yes,
is it too late? Why? G2, huge esports team, right? Ninja was also put money up for this. Mr. Beast put up money for this. I don't know what the current Fall Guys player base numbers are like, but they're way down from when, this was here. How do you recover? Like, does this still, here's the business question. Does this still look like a good investment if you're G2, right? Where you paid, I don't know, 250K or 300K or whatever the total number was finally, because it was a huge number that they split. I think it was finally like almost $1 million or something that they split, right? If you're the head of G2, are you still happy about that investment?
Yes, because they donated it all to charity, and at the time it was a really good goodwill public event, and 250K isn't a lot to lose in terms of what they have. So I feel like
you're a G2 investor, let's put it that way, because G2 is not a profitable business, right? So they're still burning investor cash. If you're a G2 investor, are you If you're a G2 investor, are you happy about money going to this skin at this point in time?
No. No, but I kind of blame Fall Guys for this, because what they should have done is waited for it to start to trend downwards and then release the skin to give it the bump back up and then let it fall again. Instead of
what they did?
All the way down. No, because they let it fall too far down, It's too late.
There's a happy medium.
Yeah.
So it's a skin. What I don't understand is why not immediately?
Yeah.
Right? Like, why wasn't it like a week or two after?
That's a question I really, really can't answer. And that may have been riding the hype train a little too far or a little too soon. I would have liked them to see when their community sort of started to lose bigger numbers of players and then release it, bump it back up, and then you let the natural downward spiral will continue. But I think had they released it in a more strategic time, this would have been great. That being said, I never think that money going to charity is necessarily a bad look.
No question, right?
That part's good.
No, I don't think anyone here is debating that, right? The charitable cause is a win.
We also don't have all the metrics, right? Like $130,000 to spend on advertising. If you look at it as advertising, we don't have the metrics to determine whether it's a good or bad investment. Not going to blanket say, hey, it was good, but $130,000, like they got a lot of articles, a lot of earned media out of it, not to mention the actual people that are still playing the game and engaging with it. So I bet there's some consultant there or someone in their, their strategy or whatever that's put together some spreadsheet that shows that this was like the best return on investment marketing spend they've ever done. Now, the reality is probably somewhere between the two. But, just saying, hey, they spent $130,000 on this, blah, 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 doesn't necessarily mean that it was bad spend.
So we should have done a Business of Esports skin, is what you're saying.
Well, I'm saying it could have been worth it. I mean, we'll never know. I mean, I think personally, you guys should do a Super Bowl commercial, because I think that's way better. It's way better spend. So
you heard it here first, guys. EEG will be sponsoring the Business of Esports Super Bowl ad. It's a done deal, effectively. Cam says, I called it many streams ago. Fall Guys built the hype train and then never got on. This is why I'm like, game development and investing in games, like there's a bigger argument here of just how tricky it is, right? Like literally how tricky it is to find winners when it's so fickle, right? When the audience is so fickle, you could be the hottest game one day, you could have massive traction, and I'm sure they made money like just because of that massive traction, right? They for sure recouped all the cost of a game like Fall Guys. But like, if you're the investor betting on this, you're betting on more than just, making a nice return for the developers. You need to make a 10x. And the audience is just so fickle. It's not easy. Right? It's why I think betting on games has to be a portfolio strategy. It can't be a one-off. And I feel bad a little bit for the G2s and the Mr. Beasts and the Ninjas who, again, it's all a great cause. It's for charity, all good things. But I think even if I'm in their shoes, I had sort of expectations that this would have sustained its hype until at least my skin came out.
Yeah, they definitely should have done a better job of strategically releasing it.
Mark says you still could. Oh, Mark, we're doing the Super Bowl ad. You heard it here. So tune in. What that ad's going to be about, or we'll have to figure that out. Me tackling William in some capacity would be very entertaining for me.
Of course.
And the rest of us.
Neil says, I'd buy the Biz of Esports skin. There you go, Neil. We got one customer.
Now you just have to price it at $130,000 and then you break even.
Mark says maybe a Business of Esports skin is what Fall Guys needs. If anything can drive a comeback, it's the Business of Esports. So I agree with you wholeheartedly there, Mark. Cam says, I sucked the first day I played. Day 2, I won 6 games in a row. Haven't played since. No wait to Fall Guys, unfortunately, would be a better mobile game. I wouldn't look, PUBG was sort of dead in the water on desktop and mobile did reinvigorate them. I would argue mobile reinvigorated.
How does it monetize?
What's that? Same way. Skins.
It's skins? Okay, so it would kind of work on mobile.
It would kind of work, I think.
Then you could put ads in too.
Oh, mobile games don't usually monetize on cosmetic economies. It's more like pay to win. So I don't know would necessarily work as much.
I mean, it would be easy to, you have 6 lives a day or whatever as well.
If I'm Fall Guys at this point, isn't it worth trying? Right? Realistically, it's a good idea. I like it.
Yeah, I think kids would love that.
I wouldn't play it, but I think people would love it. Okay, I'm gonna do. So we did that. This is a bit of a PSA. If you guys are gonna like this. This doesn't even. Let's forget the website or the author. Doesn't matter. The headline here is "How to Invest in Esports: The Perfect Guide." Okay, they spared no expense here. How to invest in esports: the perfect guy. Okay, and here's a bit of my rant. I love journalists, right? They're great. They should be reporting the esports news. Esports is one of the only industries on the planet where the journalists, for some reason, are also the business experts, which is weird because I don't think that's taught in journalism school and social science and God knows what else. Like 2 years out of journalism school, probably shouldn't be commenting on business or investing. But this is the perfect guide to investing in esports. And here's what they recommend. Again, the perfect guide. So they talk a little bit about how money's made in esports. Ways to invest. Gaming company stocks. Okay, so they talk about buying and selling stocks like Activision, Blizzard, etc. And backing esports teams. And they talk about, like 100 Thieves and Luminosity and Liquid and all that stuff.
Do they explain how someone can actually do that? Without, no. Well, I guess they do talk about Enthusiast, which owns, some teams, sort of. So,
well, they even say that it's like hard to invest in teams, like it's not open to everyone. But these are the ways in the perfect guide, the ways to invest in esports: gaming company stocks and backing esports teams. I mean, do you guys feel like this is a perfect guide to investing in esports? Is this a fair? Is this?
I don't see anything about GMBL in there, so I have to push back a little bit. But to be fair, I mean, it brings up a broader point. I mean, there are like very few great ways to invest in esports in the public markets. I think that's one of the things that we're trying to do at GMBL is provide a vehicle for investors to get exposure to different areas in esports. But to that, we kind of rag on that article, but like, what would be your response? Like, how would you actually? The reality is the publishers probably are the best, safest way for an individual.
But there's a difference between, so I agree with you wholeheartedly. I obviously agree GMBL is filling a gap that the industry needs, right? But like, if you call it the perfect guide, saying backing an esports team and investing in gaming company stocks and ending there, you've sort of missed out on some of the other pieces of the picture. I mean, there are private esports startups, tech companies that you could invest in. There are ETFs you could invest in. There's a few other different ways you could be playing this.
Well, yeah, there's even
in a perfect guide.
You would think they would at least mention the ETFs. I mean, I could understand if you're trying to talk to retail investors, it's hard to be like, oh, well, just become an accredited investor, have a few $100,000 in a portfolio, and then, invest in a startup. Like, go source a deal, put together a legal team.
How is that different from saying back an esports team?
Well, I think they caveated that by like saying, hey, Enthusiast Gaming is public. Like, I don't know. I just glanced through the article. I'm trying to give the guy a little credit.
I'm not attacking any individual or even the outlet here. I think there's a bigger problem that needs to be resolved over the next few years, which is we can't be turning to the journalists as experts, right? There needs to be reporting of facts and news, which is a vital piece of the industry, right? But leave the opining and the analysis to people who actually maybe have invested a few dollars in their lifetime.
Again, to be fair, if you're getting your financial advice / portfolio advice from whatever website that was, I mean, I don't know. Like, please.
Yeah, saying my years of investing based solely on BuzzFeed articles isn't going to work for me in the end.
Yeah. Well, take this 10-question quiz to determine what kind of fruit you are and what stock you should buy.
Yeah.
Neil says that the stocks only go up. Neil, I don't know who taught you otherwise, but stocks, if you have a Robinhood account, only go up in one direction, especially GMBL only goes up. So this is how you should do it. P&L, agree, irrelevant. Fundamentals, irrelevant. Strategy, irrelevant. People, irrelevant. All stocks only go up, of course. Look, I think you're right. No one should be taking investment advice from this kind of website. But I do believe that esports, more than any other industry, and I think it's the immaturity of the industry, there's a certain amount of trust in the journalists when they're reporting opinion more than just fact, right? Which is scary to me a little bit, right? I worry for the mainstream, investor / interested business person in the industry who's maybe on the outside, right? Knows nothing about esports and may see this article, right? And not get such a perfect guide to investing in the space. That's the fear I have, right? Which is, what is the first piece of education that people might see? I worry about things like this that are sort of woefully lacking or incomplete. Yeah. Cam says GMBL. By the way, Neil, congrats. Neil made a big announcement today. He left CSL after doing incredible work there. He is literally the most valuable free agent in all of esports right now. One of the smartest guys in the whole space. If you don't follow Neil, go follow him, guys. Come on. Like, what are you doing with your life if you don't listen to what Neil has to say? Chris says, congrats, Duffy, on the big move. There you go, Chris. You're exactly right. Mark, how long will it be before an esports org buys a mainstream sports team? What do you guys think about that? That's a good question.
How would that work from a value? Like,
well, I think Mark, let me try and specify what you're really asking here is, at what point do the esports org valuations eclipse the mainstream sports team valuations, and we start seeing, mergers or acquisitions where the esports team is buying the sports team?
I think we're kind of a ways away from that, just in terms of the revenue streams. I mean, the TV contracts for the NFL and for these leagues, that really is what underpins the valuation of these teams. I mean, they're multiples higher still. Now, obviously, we all, on this podcast and everyone watching is aware of the eyeballs and the opportunity in esports, and we're all believers in that. But we still have a ways to go in terms of catching up. I mean, what was the last LCS deal, or what's the biggest TV deal that there's been? Maybe a few $100 million a year, I want to say.
Yeah, the Overwatch League CDL deal was $100 million. League did the Billy, but that was just for Asia, right? And it was 150 or something like that, right? 200, something like that. You're talking,
So we're talking with the NFL, it's like billions, I think. Like multiple billions. So we still
put a timeline. Put a timeline. What is the timeline in your mind? Because I think we all agree that will happen.
Well, so one of the other things that's a little bit makes this question a little bit hard to pin an exact answer is because, who owns traditional sports teams? It's like, rich owners, and they're also buying esports teams. So it's like, it would be hard, it's kind of like hard to do it the opposite way. But I think here's the question I'll answer. Here's the question. I'm dodging the question. I think there will be an esports team or organization that will go public in the next 8 to 16 or 16 months.
With what kind of valuation?
I think there will be an esports team that goes public with a several $100 million to $1 billion valuation through a SPAC. I think that will happen. And then that team at some point will buy some sort of traditional sports team, probably a MLS team.
Interesting. Why? What would be the play in buying an MLS team?
The MLS, it's one of the cheapest, and it's like an up and coming sort of league. There wasn't that much thought into that last part. I was kind of just like really that was my heat check. I was like really feeling myself with the prediction. But I think the first part I'm pretty confident about, that there will be an esports, just because there's so much capital flowing around, so much interest in the space, and there's so many of these darn SPACs that like every day there's a SPAC that comes out that says they're looking at gaming, entertainment, interactive media, and like sports franchises. So it's like it only stands to reason that at some point one of them is going to buy, 100 Thieves or a FaZe or a Liquid or whoever, Dignitas, whoever it is. It's going to happen. That will definitely happen. Then the question is, will they buy a traditional sports team? Maybe. I mean, then it was like, well, my thought process, well, what's the cheapest one?
Well, here's what I would do. I like your idea, right? But I'll add a little twist to it. I go public with my esports team, right? Let's say the valuation, north of $1 billion, whatever the number is, right? Then I buy the MLS team, but I make every player wear a model of a car, and I call it Rocket League. No one. Chris has a better idea, which is soccer is cheap and younger kids like soccer, which is true, which is a good reason to buy an MLS team, I guess, if you're an esports team. Interestingly enough, if you looked at sort of the original messaging around Activision Blizzard's esports leagues when they were sort of shopping around Overwatch League and things like that, like a lot of their messaging was very focused on value relative to MLS teams. That was the big comparison that they were making. And that they could get their esports teams up to MLS value levels over the next 5 to 10 years, essentially. They had a not that aggressive, like your timeline's much more aggressive than theirs was if you're looking at just the Activision Blizzard leagues. Lindsay, I don't know if you have a thought on this or if you have a different timeline from Jeff or.
No, I mean, I think Jeff pretty much nailed it. I do think that esports has already in some ways eclipsed even larger professional sports leagues like the MLB and the NHL in certain metrics, not necessarily in revenues. So it just means it's only a matter of time before I think that if someone can figure out how to acquire a fan base, I think that revenue will catch up very quickly.
I would say if any sports team does manage to go public, which I think they will, again, Jeff, to your point of the sheer volume of dollars going around, like the stories we covered on the podcast, you're talking about funds with tens of billions of dollars that are now, like when you're a fund that size, you don't make one investment in the space, right, and call it a day. If you're a fund that size and you're putting hundreds of millions of dollars to work, you have a sector strategy. You have some sort of level of, okay, we're going to make 5 investments here and here's how, right? Like when you're talking about this level of dollars, this size of capital, the size of funds involved, the size of of all these kinds of things and how fast those numbers are growing. And they're betting on growth in a big way, right? These are sophisticated investors. Like William and I sort of did back of the envelope math. We're talking about investors who are betting that Roblox, for example, will grow 20x over the next few years, right? Like this is not small numbers.
How do you get to that?
Based on the valuation they're paying.
But why do you assume? I mean, I guess I wouldn't
watch the podcast to hear the math.
All I would say is I wouldn't expect at these late stage investors, they're investing it's already a public company. Like I wouldn't necessarily say that because they're putting in private money, they're expecting it or anticipating it to go up 20x.
I actually think they are expecting it to go up 20x. I don't think that's the kind of return they're expecting or model, right? But I wouldn't be surprised if they did similar math and said, we actually think this could 20x.
They may to justify in some investment committee meeting, but that seems, 20x, that would be like Google. Like, are they really?
But think about it. They have 30 million users today, right? They want to be a social network. If we're talking social network scale, we're talking a few 100 million users, which is not, in the grand scheme of things, impossible to fathom.
Right. I'm just saying, I think as a late stage investor, maybe they're underwriting it to like 2 to 5x over the next, 5 to 7 years.
No question.
That just seems, is there some, you're the VC, so you would know better than I clearly, but like at this late stage, it feels like that would be an aggressive thing to be really underwriting. Maybe there's some, hey, this is the ultra bull case. If Roblox becomes like literally the next social network and like we're instead of being on Instagram and Facebook where everyone's on Roblox, then yeah, maybe it's probably worth $800 billion. But I can't imagine that that's like their even in their wildest dreams, like their base case, they're looking at it like, hey, this thing could double in 5 years, and we'd be happy. We'd make a good return.
Yeah. I really encourage everyone to listen to the podcast because we have some interesting ideas around the value of each user and how there's pressure essentially on Roblox to grow into that, right? 30 million users, $30 billion valuation, you're paying $1,000 per user, right?
Oh, but I mean, you could also argue that the valuation is implying that it's going to grow to way more users.
That's exactly my point.
Oh, okay.
Right? This is why, if they've done the math, I think realistically, even they've gone through some math that says we think this could 10 to 20x over the next few years, right? And I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility. Let's put it that way. I don't even know how we got on that, guys.
Just the question for you: do you mean 10 to 20x in users or 10 to 20x in
users.
Valuation?
In users.
Oh, is that what you were talking about this whole time?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Right?
Forget
going
that.
from.
I thought you were talking about going 10.
million
I thought you were talking about 20x their valuation.
No.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. If you're saying
investors are paying based on a growth story, right?
Of course.
Again,
yeah. Okay. I apologize.
$1,000 a user, you believe the company is going to experience some serious growth.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. We were talking past each other. I thought you meant that they were underwriting that Roblox was going to be worth $800 billion in 5 years. I was like, that I doubt that.
I think you're saying in line with what other social networks are worth of comparable size.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yep. So they're assuming some ARPU growth and some sort of, clearly you're going to get way more users, so you're going to grow into that multiple of revenue per user, and you're looking at it based on the social network. Okay, your analysis.
The beauty of that analysis is that implies these very, very sophisticated investors, and they are some of the most sophisticated on the planet, are betting on a massive growth story, right? Like they're not betting on this industry growing a little bit, right? They're making bets that this thing is that orders of magnitude in terms of growth. And that's what's exciting for me, right? Like if the biggest investors on the planet believe that, and they're making sector bets based on that, right? This is exciting for everybody. That's the optimism here. That's the really exciting part of these guys getting involved at the kind of valuations and metrics that they're getting involved at.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of it's crazy, right? Like, and I'm the first guy to say crazy valuation. Like I actually don't think any of this is crazy, because in my mind, a social network with 300 million users or 400 million users, imminently doable for Roblox. That's 10x increase in the size of their user base.
Yeah. It's going to be a fascinating stock to watch, because I think there's going to be a lot of people. It really gets to the dichotomy of, do you value this as a game or gaming stock or a platform / social media company? Because if it's a platform and it's a social media company, then you're absolutely right, and they will grow into that value. But if you're looking at it as a game, you can use William's old his Star Wars reference.
It's like 7 Star Wars, more than 7 Star Wars.
And, or even, I mean, Activision Blizzard, they have 3 or 4 of the top. Actually, they probably have 4 of the top 10 IPs in gaming. Period. Yeah, and they're worth. I guess they're worth 80 billion. So maybe they're worth
almost
double that.
100 billion now, I think.
But not too long ago they were worth 40 or 50. In the last
70 billion. 70.
So, should Roblox really be worth more than 50% of Activision? I don't know. I don't know. That's why it's fascinating. You can make a very convincing argument. Yes, it's evergreen. It's a platform. It's a social network. It's not beholden to IP. There's no hit driven. It's user generated. It has every buzzword. Metaverse. It's got it all, but it also has none of that IP. So it's like, it could literally, it's a bunch of 12-year-olds. They could wake up tomorrow and say, Roblox isn't cool anymore. I don't like Roblox, and then it's worth nothing.
Okay, I don't want to ruin the podcast tomorrow, but I will. I just want to read 2 things from their announcement, because we're on this now. But guys, still go listen to the podcast tomorrow, because we really we really have a good discussion around this.
I think this is one of the most interesting topics in gaming right now. So this is
okay.
worth.
So I will read you a quote from the CEO of Altimeter, okay, which is the $15 billion fund that led this round. Okay, he says, listen just to the first part of his sentence. He says, while once viewed as a gaming platform, Roblox has emerged as a definitive global community connecting millions of people through communication, entertainment, and commerce. What is he talking about there?
It's metaverse.
Or more simply,
a social network.
Yeah. But like he's talking about it, the sentence starts, while once viewed as a gaming platform, as if it's ancient history. Like Roblox back in the day used to be gaming and now it's not, right? Like even how every press release has an about, right? About all the companies involved. Yeah. The about Roblox says Roblox's mission is to build a human co-experience platform that enables shared experiences among billions of users. Lot to unpack there. No gaming, not even the word gaming in that sentence. Not one. They use the word experience twice, and they specifically referenced billions of users.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a fascinating stock to watch. It's going to get a lot of hype. The pitfall though is that, it has all the buzzwords, but at some point, especially for social network, investors are going to be watching those metrics like an absolute hawk. And the second they come out with their not their first quarter, because they'll nail that one, because they'll tell all the investors what the numbers will be. But that next quarter, if the growth isn't on the right trajectory, that stock will get cut in half. Like look at Snapchat right after the IPO, look at Twitter right after, LinkedIn, it's great until there will be a quarter where it goes down 40% because there will, some growth metric won't be what it's supposed to be. But that's not a knock on it. I mean, that's just reality.
It's also not a knock on the business or
the
company.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
it's a knock on the pitfalls of being a public company.
Right, and the pitfalls of having a valuation that's literally 40 times sales. If you're not growing, to your point, you were saying, hey, they need to grow 20x. They need to grow 20x to get to grow into that multiple. Well, guess what? If the trajectory is supposed to be this and it goes to this, even if that's literally just a slight, it gets crushed. That's just, that's what investing in growth stocks is. And, it's tangent, but
I just when they talk about billions of users, I'm inclined to believe them. And if you're at 30 million today, again, 10x does not seem it seems very probable in my mind, right? People think I'm always down on things. I am the eternal optimist. Trust me on just about everything I have conviction around. And I kind of love what they're doing here. It's a little bit disingenuous, a little bit, right? Not even to mention the word gaming in your mission, but it's somewhat kind of genius too, right? Chris says, good night, guys. Gonna hit the dispensary and get whatever Paul is smoking. Good night, Chris. Enjoy. Cam says, love the 8-time Star Wars valuations. I mean, William did bring this up, right? Is it worth 8 Star Wars? I don't know.
To me, the billions number was one they should have kept in their back pocket. Because I agree with you. It's hey, that's great. That's hype and everything. And you're an optimist. But to me, I see that and I start doing math, right? And I'm what is an analyst in you? And they're going to say, you have 30 million users now. If I think I'm valuing you saying you're going to get to 1 billion, I mean, you need to be tripling every quarter in order to get there in the foreseeable time horizon. Just do the.
Okay, here's the question for either of you: would you buy the stock when it goes public at a $30 billion valuation?
Yes.
Yeah. My knee-jerk reaction was to say yes because I do believe that they're going to grow.
I'm telling you, I would buy the stock. Interestingly enough, I would.
Well, Paul or Neil already said stocks only go up, so
right.
Problem solved.
This is a hot stock. Everyone said it. So when you're talking about investing, particularly in this market right now, everyone said there are bear cases to all these stocks. Like, look at Unity. There were very smart people that I talked to when Unity was coming out. And I don't remember where you guys were on this one, but like there were people who were like, look, it's really just an ad network. They already have so much market share in gaming. The valuation is building in a lot of, they're going to have to dominate different areas. They have a big competitor in Epic that arguably you could say is better, on console and PC. There was a lot of good bear cases. People were like, oh, I don't know if it's going to be a hot stock. And I was like, it's going to be a hot stock. It touches every freaking box right now that investors want. It's SaaS, it's gaming, it's subscription, it's growth, it's tech. It's going to go up, and it has. And at some point, I'll say this about Unity, just like I said it about Roblox. There will be a quarter where Unity is going to get absolutely demolished. Now, if I knew what quarter that would be, I wouldn't be on this podcast. I'd be working a hedge fund, and it would be great. You'd be investing in my hedge fund, Paul. But with growth companies like this, there will hit a quarter where there will hit a road bump, and that will happen to Roblox as well. But in the short term, you absolutely buy that day one because there will be a ton of demand for that stock. The question that I have to you, the more interesting question, where would you short it? That is something I'm interested to hear your opinion.
I wouldn't though, because I think
well, where do you think
the three most exciting plays from a public company perspective, like that are like yet to go public. Like Unity, I was excited about because it's a platform, right?
Yeah.
Roblox, I'm excited about because fundamentally it's a platform, right? They're not, again, dependent on pumping out hit games, right? There's 7 million developers that are doing the work for them, right? And I think those businesses, while they may have bad quarters, long-term end up being very successful, especially if they have ambition around social and things like that, right? The other one for me is Discord. Again, another platform where they provide the tools and the underlying infrastructure, but you have a lot of people modding and using Discord in a million different ways. Like I love, and I think most venture investors really love platform plays because of the nature of those businesses. It's often recurring revenue streams. It's often like a lot of work that's offloaded to other people. And so like I'm long-term bullish on those platform plays, even if there are quarters where there are blips, right? They don't hit whatever number the analysts are expecting.
I'm not trying to, this isn't me, I'm not like some hedge fund monkey trying to play quarters. Oh, look, like it's going to go down some quarter. It's more like when that happens, multiples get reset because people start looking at it and saying, hey, I thought, Roblox could get to 1 billion users. This change in the trajectory of growth now leads me to underwrite they can only get to 400 million users rather than 1 billion. That's why the quarter matters. Not like, oh, haha, you missed some analyst expectations. Like, I'm going to sell your stock. Like that's if you're an investor, you're an idiot. But if there's a data point that changes your view on the future growth, that's when you sell this. You have your valuation has to change.
Yeah, but I don't think. Like, look, I don't know what reaction people would have. I don't think a bad quarter is enough to completely reset valuation expectations when they will always have 2 or 3 others in the market that may still be running with crazy valuations, right? You know what I mean? Like if Unity's running around still trading at 40 times sales, right? I think Roblox having a bad quarter, the analysts are not going to be like, oh my God, we got to reset expectations. This is a 10x multiple now, not a 40x, because they're going to look at Unity and go, well, people are paying 40 for that. Maybe we shouldn't panic. Like, I think there will always be enough exciting comparables, at least for the next couple years, and big caveat, as long as the general markets stay strong, right? Like, because if markets go to shit in general, there's not much you can do other than just sort of focus on building a good company. But like for now, it's hard to see a situation, I think, where you see really, really big dips in some of these plays, because fundamentally, I think they are good long-term businesses. I worry a bit more about an Epic because I worry a little bit about the leadership there. And I worry much more about Fortnite's ability to evolve beyond the game long-term. But Roblox doesn't have that issue, right? So if I had to put money somewhere.
The only thing I would say is that, look, thinking about it now, ahead of time, yeah, you could easily say, well, I'm still going to think it's a good business. But I would say that narratives, particularly with high growth, high multiple, stocks, they can change in an instant, right? Like you can go from saying,
True.
hey, Roblox is going to be a social network, the bear case flips immediately, and you'll have these people saying, no, wait a second, it's a gaming platform, right? And it targets 8 to 15-year-old boys largely. No, it's a little more diverse than most gaming platforms, but like it's largely young boys. They are very fickle. They change platforms all the time. Something can be cool one second, not cool the next. It doesn't monetize particularly well. Like the user base is good, it's sticky now, but if retention starts to flip, you could, instead of going from 30 million daily active users to a billion, you can go from 30 million to 50 to 20, right? So it's like, that inflection point happens at some point, and the narrative, it's almost stupid having this conversation now because it's like, I'm just sort of sounding negative. You're sounding super positive. But I
think it's worth the discussion. But I also think this is one of the feathers in the cap of Roblox, which is it's somewhat misunderstood. Like right before we went on air, I saw it's again one of these people who I think has no business sort of commenting on the business side, right? It's like I have a degree in religion or something, right? And I've never worked in a business in my life, but I'm going to comment on, right? And the headline in their post was $550 million for a game for little kids. Like it was that kind of clickbaity headline, right? Yeah. And I'm going, well, you clearly didn't read the S1 because it's actually not little kids, right? Like literally half the user base is like our age, like people in their 30s, So this is not just like, hey, it's a bunch of like 12-year-olds who like this for 2 months and then move on. There's really, I think, a pretty strong user base here. And the fact that most people don't take the time even to understand it, and there's still this much hype, means I almost think like it's underhyped still, right? By the time everyone comes around and realizes what the actual fundamentals are, I go, well, geez, that the excitement is going to increase, not decrease.
I totally agree. And that's why I was saying I would absolutely be buying it off the bat because I think it's a great business and it's a great, it's going to be a great story for people on Wall Street. I was just talking about at some point that story could flip. And I mean, I've been a huge fan of Roblox for a while. If you remember when I was on the podcast the first time, I literally said Activision should buy Roblox. Like that was when I was $4 billion.
Can't afford it now.
I was like they should have absolutely done it because I remember at BlizzCon last year, Bobby, there was a whole thing with investors, and he was talking up, social platforms and user-generated content, blah blah blah, social networks, and I was like, he's gonna buy Roblox. Like everyone knows, Bobby's a deal guy. He has this massive clause in his contract where he gets like some ungodly amount of money if he does an accretive deal. That's like, I think it's something like 30% accretive. He gets like $400 million in cash.
He needs it. Poor guy.
Insane, but like, so he has a massive incentive to do a deal. So I thought he was going to buy Roblox. Roblox apparently is smart enough not to sell to Activision Blizzard, so that's another feather in their cap.
Yeah.
But the only last thing I was going to say about this is we're sort of talking up Roblox so much, and I was just looking up, for example, Twitter's market cap, which I incidentally enough is 40 billion. Yep. So you can make a lot of the exact same arguments about Twitter as you do about Roblox. It is a social platform. It is a social network, clearly, massively. Everyone on earth knows what Twitter is. I would argue way more than Roblox. Their TAM is arguably way bigger than Roblox because anyone can have Twitter. Roblox, probably you have to at least be somewhat into gaming. So why is Roblox worth more than Twitter?
Because it's gaming. That's why.
I'm just saying.
It's the medium of the future rather than the medium of the past, right? There's a lot of people still writing letters. I wouldn't be betting, like.
I personally love Twitter. I get a lot of my news from there, but yeah, I guess
total cool. I would never invest $1 in that website.
But it has a ton of users.
Yeah, but struggles to monetize big time, really big time. And I think the user base is quite homogeneous. Let's put it that way. There's
Twitter?
It's a very specific audience.
Oh, I disagree.
The audience that used to be somewhat different has moved to other platforms. Let's put it that way.
I think you can make, if you were laying out the bear case for Roblox, it would look a lot like the bear case you just laid out for Twitter.
No. Mm-mm. Twitter
Doesn't
again. Twitter
monetize, homogeneous, a lot of
games
churn.
are much easier to monetize. They're more compelling. They're more immersive, right? People spend way more time playing a game than just 3 minutes scrolling through Twitter. So the engagement's higher. Like the reality is there's huge differences in engagement between the two.
I don't know. I would argue social
Twitter is
network.
also fundamentally a broadcast medium. Like it's good one-to-many. It's actually pretty shitty one-to-one, right? Or
True.
many-to-one. And gaming is not like that, right? Gaming is just as good one-to-one as it is one-to-many. And so, like, I think fundamentally as a social network, Twitter's probably one of the worst ones. It's also not a visual medium, which is proven better, right? You can convey a lot more information, a lot more emotion even through a game, a video, or an image than you can through text. It has a lot going against it. It's why I think the stock is where it's at and why it's taken sort of the beating it has over the years, because they've struggled. They've struggled to grow the user base, and they've struggled to monetize.
They have 180 plus million DAUs. So
in 2 years, Roblox will be far bigger than Twitter. Far bigger.
No way. DAU wise, I'll make that bet. What do you want to bet right now?
I will bet you $500 that in 2 years, Roblox is bigger than Twitter from a DAU perspective.
Done. I don't think they're going to have 180 million DAUs. Is there any video game that has 180 million DAUs? Or are we just saying, oh, he literally couldn't even... I just won.
Yeah, his take was too hot. Yeah, I agree with you though. I don't think Roblox. I think it's going to take longer than 2 years.
Thank you. 180 million DAUs. I mean, Steam doesn't even have 180 million DAUs. They don't even have, I think, 40 million DAUs.
The trend that I've been calling for years now. In fact, if you go back, I was calling this trend since 2011. I wrote a blog post about this when I was a VC, when I was managing a venture fund. And I was talking about the shift in attention to gaming, right? And fundamentally, that shift took many years, but we hit an inflection point, and that shift is accelerating. And so you can't look at the growth metrics from the last few years and extrapolate, because I think what we're going to see over the next 2 years is just massive, like, again, orders of magnitude type of growth. 180 million in a sea of 3 billion gamers is not that big.
I mean,
We'll see.
how many DAUs does like
PUBG, Call of Duty? They're like 100 million, right? That's on that.
How many DAUs does all of console gaming have? Like the entire TAM of console gaming might be like 100 million DAUs.
Like I said, I think the biggest games you're talking about 100 million. And
No,
in Asia, it might be bigger, like the Garena, Free Fire, and stuff like that. Like, I don't know what their numbers look like.
Garena, we can look up. Garena, Free Fire, DAUs. I don't think it's that big, but anyway, I think that's probably high. So Garena's record-breaking DAUs was 80 million.
Okay.
So, I mean, Roblox can be double that
in 2 years. 2 years.
No.
All right. Well, we made the bet. It'll be a fun bet. I don't think.
Do you think the valuation will be greater than Twitter's in 2 years?
Well, it's already greater than Twitter, so probably, yeah.
Well, no, you said Twitter was at 40 billion.
Yeah, Roblox was 40 or 35.
29.5.
Okay. Yeah. What's 10 billion between friends?
So do you think in 2 years the valuation will be greater than Twitter's?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, enough about Twitter to have a super educated guess, but I think if Twitter got new management and figure out how to monetize, they clearly, let's put it this way, Twitter will have more DAUs than Roblox in 2 years.
Okay.
I'll bet that.
You guys heard it here. You're going to hold them to paying me my $500 in 2 years from now.
Shirley will hold you to paying him $500. That's
I would like mine. I would like my $500 in Business of Esports stock. Struck at today's valuation.
Struck at today's valuation. Sounds good. I'll take mine in EEG stock and GMBL stock if you want. I'm fine with that at today's valuation. I love it, guys. Look, I didn't have much else. I had a few sort of small stories. I don't know if you guys want us to talk about it. There was one around a study that no, Cam, I see this.
Yeah,
That means a lot to me.
undoubtedly, Cam.
I want to hear from everyone else. I got Lindsay on my side. I got Cam on my side.
Paul sees like 10% of Twitter and it's like, it's horrible, but like then forgets about the other 90%.
I mean, Twitter is a cesspool, but it's like a global,
Sometimes.
you know,
Everyone's
everyone's
talking like I haven't been doing this 20 years. Like, can you give me a little bit of credit here?
I think you're just drinking the Kool-Aid right now. You got the metaverse, social platform. I mean, it's Roblox. If I asked 20 people on the street, probably one of them would have heard of Roblox.
Jeff, I am not drinking the Kool-Aid. I am serving the Kool-Aid, all right? Right? Let's get you clear. I don't know if you guys wanted to talk about this before we sign off here. If anyone has any interest, pipe up in chat. This one was an article here. Hang on. I have to reshare my screen here. An article about a 10-year study that they did on gaming, finding no link between violent video games and violent behavior. I don't think there's much to discuss. I'm happy these studies come out, right? It's sort of been obvious to me all these years. The other thing was this one I thought was kind of just a fun story. I don't know if there's much discussion here, but why gamers should be at the top of your hiring list. And they talk about like some of the skills like digital communication prowess, creative problem solving, shared growth mindset, building bonds and culture through gaming. Like at what point in the future does gaming become part of the interview? Like where you have to run a few rounds of Call of Duty or something as part of your interview.
Oh God, I hope not.
I hope so.
This is also why like experience in athletics has kind of the same feel. Like I've many people, not one-to-one, but I'm just saying, like in hiring processes, I've gotten a lot of comments about, growth mindset, working with a team, collaborating.
People do value it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not a one-to-one comparison. I'm just saying like those
I think
skills.
You're right though. Like if you go into an interview, Lindsay, and talk about your background in basketball, like any employer would see that as a positive.
Yep, exactly. I think gaming is on a very similar path if it's not there already.
So you think like we're talking like today, you think employers would have the same attitude?
I mean, it totally depends. I think in older generations, maybe not, but in younger, we're starting to see, millennials move into positions of management who, the older millennials, the 35 to 45 crowd, they know.
I mean, you work for a think tank that is sort of does a lot of research around tech and even some gaming, right? Like if you were hiring someone to work for you, how much of their sort of prowess around gaming would make an impact on you from a hiring decision standpoint?
Because, well, it kind of depends. But I will say that because I'm more familiar and comfortable with athletics, it is something that I look for. I also, if people would talk about like strategy-based games or team-based games, like that would be really interesting to me. I'm not, out there looking for Owl League fans or anything, but no, it's something that it's like anything. My sister had that she's certified to pour the perfect Guinness on her resume. Like there's like just these.
That is a very strange.
That's pretty cool.
Exactly.
Like, cool.
there's I mean, I use basketball, but the point is that there's ways to make you stand out and show that that showed that she was adventurous and that she can follow through on things or whatever. The point is that I think that gaming is another element to bring or to quickly show people that you are creative, that you do problem solve, that you are innovative, that you can stick with something. It's just another good characteristic or thing to have.
I gotta get something cool to put on my resume. What can I do in gaming that's cool to put on my resume? Should I beat some games?
I mean, just playing some games might be a start. Beating, let's not be too ambitious here.
What's the hardest game I could beat?
No, Jeff, you should put on that you're still a New York Jets fan. That shows perseverance.
That does show. Yeah, that shows character.
Yeah,
that does.
You go toe to toe with the Prophet every week.
I would have definitely. I was ready to quit.
You go toe to toe with the Prophet every week. How is this not compelling on a resume?
Speaking of toe to toe with the Prophet, guess how many DAUs Twitch has?
DAUs on Twitch, I would say sub 10 million, like maybe 5 million.
All right, 26 million. So
That's,
I don't
that's
think
a
Roblox.
lot. It's more than I would have guessed.
I was surprised. So one, I'm surprised that Roblox already has more DAUs than Twitch, which is interesting. But
Data
that
point,
would be,
sure.
4 times as big or 5 times as big. I don't think so.
What is YouTube?
I'm gonna relish this win. Don't worry. I'm gonna.
YouTube's got to be a lot. I bet YouTube's like 100 million.
Oh yeah, 100 plus for sure. No question.
So I mean,
I always felt YouTube was about an order of magnitude bigger than Twitch. I don't know what the exact number is. Cam says, I maybe missed a comment here, guys, but Cam says, makes sense, goes back to your EP with the general, my episode with the general. Cam, what were you referring to? Did I miss a comment, guys? And Cam, he was a general, 3-star general, in fact.
YouTube's got 150 million DAU.
Yeah.
What's crazy is like there's on Wikipedia, there's like a list of content platforms by DAU, and it's just a bunch of random China. It shows you the scale of China / Asia, where it's like there's 5 or 6 that you just don't hear about here.
Gotta be like WeChat or Weibo.
Yeah, all ones that like we know. A lot of them are gaming related, but it's like just stuff that the average person here would have.
You guys saw the Billy rumor, right?
Billy, Youku, all this stuff. Anyway,
did you see the Billy rumor? We didn't talk about it this week. It'll probably make the news next week.
What's the Billy rumor?
That they were going to raise $2 billion potentially.
Wow.
In a Hong Kong listing.
Did not.
This is like we're talking about big numbers. Like these are getting to be really, really, really kind of eye-watering large numbers. Like for any industry. Like forget about you. Like you put this toe to toe with general, like the broader tech. We're not talking that much smaller, right? Like DoorDash's IPO, they're going to raise less money than would have raised less money than what do you call it? Like Roblox here. So we're in the game in a big way with just as big numbers. Cam says gaming skills being useful. Yeah, that's right, Cam. The general made a really great sort of point about how the skills were very, very transferable. Guys, on that note, that wraps up this week's live stream. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you guys to everyone who stayed till the end. We love doing this. Cam, Mark, all you guys, Martin, Chris, if you're still here, Greg, all you guys, the regulars who are here every week. We really appreciate you. For anyone who's lurking, who's new, next time, ask a question, interact. We love seeing new people, new faces. Tell your friends about the live stream. We really appreciate it. Go buy some Business of Esports merch, businessofesports.shop if you haven't already. I know some of you in here have. And if you get the merch and you love it, post it, send it to us. I would love to see it on LinkedIn. Makes me happy to see. I don't want pictures of your feet. I just want the socks, if that's okay. Jeff, did you get your socks finally?
I did. Yeah, they're great.
Good. And on that note, guys, stay tuned for the podcast tomorrow. It's going to drop tomorrow. It's a great episode. It's the big numbers episode. And we do this live stream every week, Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. On that note, thank you guys for coming, and we will see you next week.